Alright, so where did we leave off on Ghostbusters? Oh, yeah, right. 40 or so years ago, a bunch of top guys from SNL made a funny movie off the funny premise that if instead of calling an exorcist to get ghosts or demons of the devil or whatever out of your haunted house, you called like an exterminator, the kind you would spray for termites or get a raccoon out your shed, and that would be funny. And it was. And then they put some good effects and monsters in it, so kids actually liked it more than the adults did, which was a surprise. So they made a bunch of toys and cartoons out of it, to get a couple more bucks out of merchandising rights, and they sold real well, and the cartoon was pretty good, so both things, and thus the license, lasted way longer than anyone thought it would, so a whole generation of 6-year-olds got it in their head that this perfectly fine one-off joke of a movie was actually meant to be a fucking franchise, like Star Wars, even after the sequel was just okay, and got obsessed with waiting on a part 3 that never happened, and then they grew up and got way too mad at a forgettable but also just okay remake, and then they did a Lego sequel that brought everyone who was still alive back, plus some kids, and basically turned the whole thing into Stranger Things, plus a bit of comedy, but also mostly mournful nostalgia that actually worked better than it had any weight to, while still not really being better than pretty good, but since pretty good is basically a fucking home run when you're anything in the Sony Pictures catalog that doesn't have Kevin Feige standing off stage showing everybody how not to let your movies suck, they're rolling their dice on a sequel, and hey, does that get us about up to speed? Oh, you mean where were we on the story? Well, for reasons that are not fully explained till near the end of Act 2 for absolutely no good reason, the new Ghostbusters, a family of descendants of the late Egon Spengler, plus Paul Rudd as a stepdad-to-be, have moved back to New York, and the original Ghostbusters firehouse headquarters, where Walter Peck is now mayor and Slimer lives in the attic, because that pretty much checks everything that we haven't called back to from the original movie, yeah. The new story breaks out, and it's kind of a lot, because mostly there are about 6 different main characters, but it's never clear which of them is the protagonist, and it's also not really an ensemble, because everybody spends most of their time either apart, alone, or split into 2-person or 3-person teams for reasons that you'd normally say make no sense, but here make perfect meta sense, because it's really clearly the result of scheduling everything around the expensive legacy guest stars only being sporadically available or not necessarily guaranteed to show up for anything at all, Bill Murray. So there's 2 separate teams of Ghostbusters, maybe 3 actually, 2 different headquarters where they trap and study ghost stuff, but no conflict between them, but also no reason for them to have not interacted before this all starts up. Like literally at one point the new Ghostbusters are worried the ghost prison is full, so they have to talk to Winston Zedmore, who's been paying for all this, and someone's like, Winston didn't tell you he has a whole other ghost prison with a bunch of other Ghostbusters and plenty of new weapons and stuff, but we never find out why nobody told them, and it doesn't seem like it was meant to be a secret or a source of conflict. It just wasn't time for that exposition yet. But didn't you tell them is what the screenplay template says someone should say at that point in a movie like this. And a major character from the last one who had a whole relationship with one of the main cast has been working there the whole time and they just didn't know. Also not a source of conflict or story apparently. It just wasn't time for them to do a scene together yet, so it's a surprise. For a sort of sorry summary here, there's a new villain, far and away the most boring the series has ever featured, in the form of a ghost god who uses ice as a weapon because fear equals chills, sure. So its enemies were this lineage of South Asian fire mages who by both nominative determinism and incidental geographic proximity ties it to the Ghostbusters firehouse, once occupied by firefighters who witnessed the last time the ghost god nearly emerged in 19th century New York. Ostensibly, the Save the World goal this time is to help guest star Kumail Nanjiani claim his birthright as the inheritor of these firebending powers and defeat the ghost god, but since that really has nothing to do with Ghostbusters, they never solved that story problem. Kind of feels like it's right there in the open, with the Ghostbusters being ghost fighters who are operating out of a firefighter headquarters and the proton streams sort of working like fire hoses, and that's a prophetic parallel being drawn here. It kind of seems like the only reason to put all those pieces in place for the moment where it cuts back to like some image of ancient firebender guys using an ancient weapon that would look like the proton guns and fire hoses preceding one another, and that's the light bulb. But no, none of that. It's all just kind of happenstance. All the characters who have anything resembling an arc basically have identical "I'm sad because I haven't claimed my destiny. Oh, here's where I'm supposed to claim my destiny" arcs that pay off across the same beats of the acts with no real connectivity or relation to one another. And what's really frustrating is that everyone is pretty good here, apart from how haphazardly it's put together. The kid and the young people actors are all solid. Ernie Hudson and Annie Potts are good. Carrie Coon and Paul Rudd are good. Now, Bill Murray, whatever else you can say about him, showed up to mostly be attention here, it looks like. Aykroyd is probably better here than he's been in the other movies, even if he's really only doing exposition or introducing people to other people who do exposition. Speaking of, Patton Oswalt, really good here. They kind of waste him, but he's always good. And McKenna Grace, who was decidedly the lead of the previous movie, is still good in what would have been the main role in this one if it were somehow coherent, getting involved in an off-hours friendship with a ghost kid that has all kinds of subtext about, her character, especially in the more uncomfortable questions about what the Ghostbusters actually do or what ghosts even mean in this universe in terms of life, death, spirituality, questions of faith, that you could probably get a whole good movie out of if they were interested in making one whole good movie and not a series of disconnected, remember this, half-baked, only kind of new ideas to burnish the idea that this really is a franchise, we promise, and it can stay profitable for the Sony company shareholders. And the thing is, it has the opposite effect. It's not that it's a bad movie, it's bad, but it's not that bad. It's kind of dreary, totally forgettable, pretty boring, but not offensively terrible. But it has the opposite effect on me now that the original movie did when I was one of those kids who saw it and thought, oh man, this is so cool, I can imagine a million places where this can go, because this can't imagine that. It won't. It refuses to. It defiantly says, nah, we can pretty much just give you the car with new stuff on it. We'll put the boss fight in the firehouse this time. There's a couple new people, and the original guys are old now, so we'll do Danny Glover Lethal Weapon jokes, but that's really about it. It doesn't make me all that interested to see what the Ghostbusters do next. I mean, even the cartoon had a new monster every week, and they aren't even that creative or interested in their own fan service. There's this little demon thing that's one of the new ghost enemies that possesses objects and tools and machines. It's pretty integral to the plot and getting things from point A to point A, B, C, but, supposedly it has history with everyone else, but for some reason it's just called the Possessor. It's not the emotion-powered slime from Ghostbusters 2. Why would you leave out the only interesting thing from Ghostbusters 2? Look, I'm trying not to be too hard on this, because dudes like me in their 40s projecting unreasonably high expectations onto what was only ever a funny guys-on-the-job comedy is how we got in this whole mess in the first place, but the minimum goal of the assignment in these Legacy-quel things is to get you back in touch with good memories and make you look forward to making new ones, and man, my takeaway from the end of this is I think we're just kind of done. This is enough Ghostbusters for a while. I don't think we need any more Ghostbusters. Yeah, they call this a 4 out of 10, but I don't think they need to do this again. Hey, you know what might be interesting is Lady Ghostbusters. That might be a